Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the Animal Care Systems webinar series. I'm your host, Austin Carell. As always, we thank ALAS for helping to distribute the webinar series through the ACE community, and we thank the other participating companies. Today's presenter is Mr. Brian Jespersen. Mr. Jespersen earned his Master of Business Administration degree from Michigan State University's Eli Broad College of Business. Mr. Jespersen is the Director of Operations at Michigan State University's College of Human Medicine. He was instrumental in opening the Grand Rapids Research Center, which required moving more than 5,000 animal models and 2,000 people across 4 departments. Mr. Jespersen also helped develop and is involved in overseeing Michigan State University's COVID-19 surveillance program, which aims to test about 10,000 people per week on the campus throughout this semester and winter 2021. Animal Care Systems is pleased to host Mr. Jespersen's webinar today. The title of his presentation is Reactivating Research During a Pandemic, the Michigan State University Experience. If you have a question for Mr. Jespersen, please use the question pane in the control panel, and we will answer as many questions as we can after his presentation. Please welcome Mr. Brian Jespersen.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Hopefully everyone finds my talk worthwhile today, and I appreciate you attending. So my webinar today is Reactivating Research During the Pandemic, and this is a Michigan State experience. A little bit about me before we jump in. I've got a BS in Cognitive Science, Biological Psychology, a minor in German, a master's in Science and Integrative Pharmacology, an MBA with focus on strategy and logistics and supply chain. I've got a background in research for about 15 years, studied sleep-wake states, acute and chronic stress, the HPA or hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axes, and various pharmacology models. I'm the Director of Operations at the College of Human Medicine and have held this job since 2016. I did open the Grand Rapids Research Center in 2017, where we moved in about 200 scientists, faculty, and staff, and opened the door to 40 research labs. I've been with MSU since 2008, and I was originally hired as an academic specialist. During my time here, I've been involved in more than 500 million in capital research construction projects. During that time, I have also launched 20 core facilities. The picture to the right is our dog Scarlet, who was a puppy that we picked up right before the pandemic. And she's been an amazing new family member that's been great for my kids and wife. Quick fun fact about me is I've got a Jove publication with more than 100,000 views. And at one point it was the 3rd most viewed Jove publication on their website. Feel free to check that out and give me more views. Actually, it's a great publication of a pharmacological methodology. A little bit about MSU. We're the original land-grant university. We were founded in 1855. We're a top 100 global university and a top 40 research university. We've got about 50,000 students on campus with about 10,000 professional or graduate students. In 2018, we had 715 million in research expenditures, which has brought in over 5.1 billion in total state economic impact. During the last 10 years, MSU has been growing at an impressive rate. They've gone through a couple of global impact initiatives. These were aimed at a comprehensive investment to the university, deployed to enhance research in areas of energy, health, education, environment, national security, and global development. We hired in 100 new outstanding research faculty members whose goal is to aggressively pursue the big ideas and innovation with a global impact. Part of this is to answer the big questions and tackle the big problems, because Spartans will. Here are 6 of our new facilities that have come up during those 10 years of growth. We've got the Doug Meyer Medical Innovation Building in the top left corner, which is currently under construction. Fun fact, our construction did not stop during the pandemic, and we were one of the very few sites in the state that were allowed to continue construction. Next to that, in the upper middle, is the Grand Rapids Research Center, then the Bioengineering Facility, the Molecular Plant and Sciences Building, the new STEM Teaching Building that MSU is just opening, and then the sister building to the Grand Rapids Research Center, the Interdisciplinary Science and Technology Building, or ISTB. So I work for the College of Human Medicine, which was founded in 1964. We're the pioneer community-based medical school, which means we do not have a hospital on our campus. We partner with local communities and partner with their community hospitals. We have 7 community campuses around the state in Flint, Grand Rapids, Lansing, Midland, the Southeast Michigan, Detroit, Traverse City, and the Upper Peninsula. While Michigan State University is based in East Lansing, the headquarters for the College of Human Medicine, where I work, is based in downtown Grand Rapids. We have more than 30 divisions and centers and departments. We have invested in the last 10 years in research growth in pediatrics, OBGYN, translational neuroscience, and public health. Some of our main areas and expertise of research are in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cancer, pediatric oncology, bioengineering, autism, and women's and public health. We also have the Public Health Initiative and Flint Registry for the lead water crisis in Flint. We have more than 5,300 Spartan alumni doctors. So I wanted to bring up our mission because it's very central to who we are, and I think it kind of defines how we respond to crises and a pandemic. At Michigan State University and the College of Human Medicine, we are committed to exemplary education and creating scholars and discovering and dismantling new information and knowledge, providing service at home and abroad. We enhance our communities by providing outstanding primary and specialty care, promoting the dignity and inclusion of all people. I think this last part really underscores what we do and responding to the needs of the medically underserved, which was a lot of people during the pandemic and still is. To jump into reactivating research at Michigan State University, I thought I should go with a car analogy, considering we're the motor capital. You can think of MSU as an engine that's been running for full speed for about 165 years. This winter was the first time we put that engine in neutral. As you can imagine, there were a lot of unknowns and a lot of things that we encountered that were unexpected. So we took this time, created opportunities. We changed air filters, changed spark plugs, kicked the tires. And what we noticed was you've got to take a lot of care when you restart that 165-year-old engine and try to rev it back up. Wanted to point out leadership during a crisis. We have a fairly new president, Dr. Samuel Stanley at Michigan State University. I feel we got very lucky in that he's a doctor with a background in infectious disease. What more would you want during a pandemic? For the health colleges, the College of Human Medicine, Osteopathic Medicine, Nursing, and Health Sciences, we all report up to Dr. Norman Beauchamp, who was the previous dean of the College of Human Medicine. For the campus and health, we have Dr. Dave Wisemantle as the university physician, and the college that I work for is overseen by the dean, Dr. Aaron Sousa. This is our timeline of events that happened at Michigan State University. You can see early in March 16, the vice presidents of research and innovation sent out a memo that the research community and continuity might be affected and we need to start preparing. Luckily, we had a little bit of time before our governor issued a mandatory stay-at-home, stay-safe order. That was March 23rd. From March 23rd until about May 15th, we were in a mandatory stay-at-home order and only essential activities could occur at Michigan State University across the state. You can see we started reactivating on the 15th. when the governor's order was modified to allow an exemption to bring research back online. By June 25th, we had about 400 students, faculty, and staff reactivated from medical simulation experiences. These are medical students who need clinical experiences as part of their degree to graduate. And right now, the world needs more doctors. So this was a very crucial component in facilitating that need. By August 17th, the university had issued centralized building plans versus ad hoc building plans for each facility. So we had matured our business processes moving forward. And that was in preparation of fall semester. Unfortunately, we had to make modifications and kept fall semester largely virtual, except for some graduate students and professional students who are allowed back on campus for hands-on activities that their degrees and education dictate and necessitate. By September 12th, just recently, a couple weeks ago, Ingham County Health Department issued recommended quarantine for all MSU students and enforced quarantines on multiple frats and sororities. So we are still in the thick of the pandemic. Luckily, before we got the announcement from the Vice President's Office of Research and Graduate Studies, we were informed by our college leadership to begin preparing for a pandemic on February 25th. And we needed to prepare for disruptions to operation and supplies. We reached out and wanted to make sure our faculty and staff and services were ready for these impending potential interruptions. We reached out to our vivarium staff, as we've got a vivarium in our Grand Rapids Research Center, and notified them of our concern and asked what essential planning had begun. We spun up the operations teams in East Lansing, Flint, and Grand Rapids to begin preparing facilities for these potential events. So what did that mean to the team? Well, the facilities and operations team, which report to me, started preparing our buildings. We reviewed our building management information system. We reviewed all of our business continuity plans for the college and confirmed phone triage lists. We confirmed triage lists for departments and units, but also for our vendors and suppliers, so we could ensure we maintained crucial communication during these times. We immediately started reviewing all of our inventory and readying supplies for disruptions. So any consumables that we would normally use, we increased supply and backhouse stock while trying to determine what supplies might be needed during this period of time that we would not normally have or would not normally rely on. So that had a large focus on increasing custodial supplies like toilet paper, paper towel, disinfectant. We deployed hand sanitizer before it ran out around the country, but we only received about half of our order, which was enough to make it last during that crunch or shortage. We prepared our building and mechanical systems. We made sure we had pre-filters and extra HVAC filters on hand. We double-checked our chemistry and made sure we had enough chemicals on site to maintain building water chemistry in our cooling towers, and so we could maintain our RODI water systems in the buildings as well. We reached out to our primary and crucial vendors and service providers to ask them what our priority status was, meaning at what level of service would we be engaged if their company was running upon shortages of supplies and unable to meet all of their customer demands. Luckily, because of the type of research we do and the building and situation we are in a proximity to the hospitals in Grand Rapids, we were guaranteed and told we had a very high priority, so we should not have any issues with supplies or service. We asked all vendors what their pandemic response plan was going to be, from security to mechanical to our custodial. We immediately shifted our custodial vendor into a pandemic cleaning module, where we focused less on deep cleaning and did much more surface and touch point cleaning throughout the building, and then did more deep cleaning and additional surface and touch point cleaning late at night. We also replaced some of our disinfectants and detergents that would be normally used under LEED standards with much stronger disinfectants with shorter kill times, so we could be very effective and efficient in mitigating any potential contamination or concerns throughout our facilities. We also had to make sure employees were ready to work from home. Did everyone have the necessary office supplies, laptops, and monitors to efficiently and effectively work from home? Did they have good internet access at home and a phone to call out? In addition to all that, we reviewed access controls and all of our procedures and processes for gaps and concerns that we thought might arise during periods of extended quarantine where nobody was in our facilities or even allowed to travel to our facilities. We wanted to make sure research was prepared, and we were prepared to handle the demands of research during an uncertain time. We immediately created a research supply of gloves, N95 masks, face shields, ethanol bleach, and common laboratory supplies, increased our ability to hold on site or house on site for longer, and campus animal resources responded, the people who oversee our vivariums, and increased their food supplies and consumables so they could weather this storm as well. We contacted our gas cylinder vendors to confirm stock and increased inventory of CO2 cylinders and liquid nitrogen dewars. We increased inventory in our third-party consignment store and increased liquid nitrogen levels in all of our cryo storage vessels and covered them with cryo blankets and moved everything into a common area so a single person could easily fill all of the vessels that would be normally staggered throughout a building. Lastly, but not least, we made sure all biohazard waste and perishables were removed from labs and break rooms and anywhere else in the building. This included cleaning out break room refrigerators and making sure any perishable was out of the building. The idea behind our preparation was to ensure that we had resources and supplies to weather the storm. And so if one of us did need to interact and come on site, we could come on site efficiently and effectively, get in, get out, respond to the problem in the easiest manner possible. So our quarantine went from March 23rd through May 15th. Only essential duties were allowed to occur and only essential employees were allowed to travel in the state. On May 15th, we were notified that we should begin planning to bring research facilities back online, to reactivate and bring labs back online. The university went through each facility one by one with a fine-tooth comb, as each facility and each building has unique challenges and unique opportunities that had to be adapted and thought through to safely and effectively bring research back in these areas. As no two buildings are the same or alike, no two plans could be the same or alike. That said, the plans did maintain a strong sense of continuity and consistency across the board, and leveraged best practices and CDC practices. It took about 2 weeks to write these master plans and to prepare the building for reactivation. This process went through the Vice President's Office of Research and Innovation, spearheaded by the Office of Regulatory Affairs, with boots on the ground from Environmental Health and Safety and our Infrastructure Planning and Facilities team. It took a yeoman's effort to add signage for occupancy, social distancing, mask wearing, hand sanitizer stations galore, cover your cough stations where we offer hand sanitizer, masks, and disinfectant wipes. This was a yeoman's effort to prepare dozens of facilities across campus in 2 weeks. To respond to this need and this large effort, MSU spun up over 20 subcommittees and committees to begin preparing campus for a global reactivation as we prepared for this fall. All of our plans had shared a similar template or similar underlying building block. These were areas of importance or definitions that we thought were important components to the plan to ensure that plans would be effective, fair, equitable, and produced good results, meaning that we were able to minimize the potential of outbreaks and transmission of COVID as we reactivated. First and foremost, safety and compliance were number one. As you can read through the list, these are very, I think, sound characteristics of almost any plan, but sometimes are hard to implement and work through in such a moving or dynamic situation. But really, compassion and wellness led a lot of the plans, and concern for personnel and safety was number one. So for our response, we immediately leveraged a facility SharePoint website that we had to begin communicating these plans and guidelines. We leveraged Office 65, which was a software suite that all faculty, staff, and students have access to. That allowed us to leverage Microsoft Flow, Forms, and Power Automate to quickly spin up an online health screening form. So anyone entering our building would have to go through a dozen questions or so to ensure that you have not been exposed and that you do not have any symptoms prior to entering our building. This form also serves as a way to contact trace if the event that we did have an outbreak and needed to contact trace because of exposure. The health screening form utilized QR codes in the front of our entrance. So we had QR codes for employees and a separate one for all non-MSU guests and visitors, as we needed to track their information and ensure they adhered to the same standards as our employees. The health screening form sent email notifications to the individual who completed the form, their boss, their chair, and then we had a master database in the college. The database was integrated with Microsoft Teams, and departments were allowed oversight to ensure only employees who were given permission to return on site did. In addition to this, we spun up building-wide town hall Zoom style meetings to help facilitate communication, to help bring everybody up to speed and get everybody on the same page. These are meetings we still continue to this day to ensure that we are continuing best practices and we have not missed any gaps or concerns that we need to address. It took a lot of hand sanitizer dispensers, one at every entrance, one at every floor, at every elevator, and all major common points or movement points and paths within our facilities. We spun up mask stations at all major entrances to our buildings and required people to wear masks on site. You were to put a mask on as soon as you leave your car at MSU. We spun up cleaning supply stations with the idea that we could empower faculty and staff to clean up their workstations after them to help ensure there's no contamination, as there was a high concern for contamination through touch points. And so we had large tables deployed in different buildings with pre-filled disinfectant and paper towel, and these stations would be replenished by my staff internally. We deployed signage all around the building, including floor signage in elevators, occupancy signs on elevators, conference rooms, and bathrooms. This required calculations for space to understand load factors, or how many people you can put in a room safely and effectively, while thinking about HVAC and how fast the air turns over in the space that these people are in. In addition, we modified spaces by removing soft seating or extra seating to help encourage better behavior and social distancing. And one of the great little devices we discovered was a bathroom door foot puller handle, where you could use your foot to open the door from inside to reduce touch points as you move throughout the buildings. And last but not least, our plans required communication, communication, and more communication. It was hard to over communicate during this time, especially as the situation changed, best practices involved, and newer and better information became available, especially in response to errant behavior and trying to promote better behavior. Plans were constantly modified and recommunicated. One of the goals was to ensure the plans provided a safe and effective work environment, but also a work environment that allowed people to work and get their work done, that minimized stress and anxiety. Some of our new guidelines for these policies, anywhere between 55 square feet and 75 square feet per person in a room is our standard. These are our social distancing occupancy load factors. Depending on the flexibility of the furniture and the configuration of the room, you would fall within one of those load factors. Break rooms, conference rooms, and all social spaces are still closed to this day. We ask that you wear a mask in all common shared spaces. The only time you can have a mask off is in your private office, which is why I have a mask off while I'm talking to you. We require all employees, faculty, staff, and students to wear face masks and a face shield if you're working closer than 3 foot to somebody from more than an impromptu passing setting. Everyone, faculty, staff, students, guests, visitors, and vendors must pass a health screen before coming on site. We also require that our vendors and service providers provide a plan of their pandemic response so we can ensure that their guidelines and best practices line up with ours, and we ensure a safer work environment for everybody. All of these activities, to bring somebody on campus, to reactivate a lab, to host or have a simulation educational experience or clinical experience on campus, all required a reactivation plan. These were detailed plans that addressed who, what, when, where, and how you were going to socially distance and follow all of the guidelines. And then why? Why did this event have to be done on campus in person, and why could it not be done virtually? We had multiple plans that could not pass muster, but we had dozens and dozens of plans that did pass muster and were approved for reactivation for that event or activity. Again, all of these plans included people cleaning up after themselves, and then we would coordinate staff, we would coordinate our custodial staff to clean up after every event and before every event. So we cleaned all common areas and touch points multiple times before, during, and after events. Again, all the plans and everyone was reminded to frequently wash hands and use hand sanitizer. How did we do? What were our results? Well, we were able to safely reactivate over 200 research labs to date. More than a dozen research facilities have reactivated since June 1st. What did we learn? Older buildings require much more effort to reactivate and time than newer facilities. Older buildings with older HVAC and mechanical systems are much harder to turn online and often have more gaps and faults in them to bring them back. They're also harder spaces to work with to implement social distancing potentially. But what we did find in our newer research buildings, where a lot of them have implemented the open lab concept, it required a lot more programming and staggering of shifts to safely bring people back into open labs and the newer, more open space work environments. Thus far, we have had 0 outbreaks on campus with these plans implemented. All of our plans follow best practices. They're constantly updated as newer and better information becomes available, and all plans follow CDC guidelines. Again, we reactivated medical simulation experiences in June 25th and still have them going to date on campus. Another item or resource we spun up in response to the COVID pandemic was the COVID-19 Early Detection Program, or as we affectionately call it, Spartan Spit. The university green-lighted a program and provided funding to spin up a lab that would have the capacity to process 10,000 samples a week or 2,000 samples a day. This is a PCR-based test where we have an online interface that is attached to a text messaging system where any of our faculty, staff, and students can enroll into this program, and they would be asked to provide a spit sample once a week or less often. And then those samples are processed and run. All the data is anonymous. So the lab does not know whose sample is whose or what the outcome or positive or negative outcome of that sample is. These samples and the surveillance program is designed to provide a resource to keep campus safer, to allow people to work and reduce stress and anxiety levels, to provide a tool and a resource for the university to understand the prevalence of COVID on campus and within its community, so it can make its best decisions and help minimize the impact of COVID to its students, faculty, and staff, to the surrounding community, and minimize the impact to the university and its business itself. To date, we are in the third week of this program, and we've had great success and participation. We believe we will have a CLIA certified approval within the next couple of months to spin this up into a clinic or diagnostic test. Why am I bringing this up? About 2.5, 3 months ago, I was asked to shed 85% of my responsibilities and help spin this program up overnight. We were able to launch this in under 2 months and have hired around 20 people in a lab to support this effort. I think every good talk deserves a critical evaluation and a look back as to what worked and what didn't work. I think it's good to remember that behavior is really hard to change because change in of itself is hard. And right now we are asking people to change a lot of behavior, which is causing a lot of stress and anxiety for people. So we are asking a lot of people right now. We know that wearing a mask all day, constant hand sanitizer use, while trying to be highly cognizant throughout your day is extremely taxing and stressful for employees. So any way to provide wellness and mitigate stress to your employees is definitely goes above and beyond right now. And keeping an ear to the ground and understanding how well employees respond as a whole is something that leaders really need to pay attention to ensure that their staff can make it through the long game and that we're still ready to do everything we can when we spin back up completely. As a leader, leaders need to lead with kindness and compassion and empathy. That said, the leader should hold the line and do it with tact and grace. During this crisis, leadership is definitely top down, as those in middle management and below look to the top for direction and guidance. That said, middle management and supervisors still must lead and still must be a source of strength for their team and team members. They need to fill those gaps and are crucial in ensuring that stress and anxiety is minimized and business continuity remains. One thing I keep repeating is that communication is key. Repeat the message, and communicate more and more. Repeat the message at least 7 or 8 times to ensure people get it and hear it. What were some of the keys to our success? I think we had a agile and flexible team. We were able to adapt our efforts to new changes and new crises and situations. We were prepared to change course and meet challenges head on. We hired teams with the ability to adapt and be flexible, and we developed those abilities within the team members as well. I think it's important to be honest to your team and let them know that we're in times of ambiguity, and that's okay. Not everything has to be a matured process and completely ironed out with an SOP. Sometimes we just have to move forward and fill gaps and then mature the process later down the line. I think it's key to be open. It's key to be honest, be a human, lead by example, and it's okay to show concern and weakness as long as you lead with strength. I mentioned being agile. In my background, I've some training in computer science and programming, and originally started my career off as a computer programmer. And so I kind of lean on different computer programming methodologies. And one of those is the Agile development method, which I think can be applied to situations of high ambiguity and change, very much like the pandemic we are currently going through. So this is a resource and tool to help you respond effectively and quick in these times of change and stress. The method is an iterative development method, meaning you immediately plug the hole, stop the leak, and then work to refine that plug and how we stop that leak over time. It requires cross-functional teams, and this is customer-driven, meaning you are constantly interacting with your customers or users to understand their experience, improve their experience, and address their concerns and problems. So it is really a two-way street. It is open communication through dialogue. The Agile method allows you to immediately plug holes, offer solutions, to buy yourself some time, and then refine those processes and improve them and make them more efficient and more effective. It allows a rapid delivery of high-quality products or solutions. And again, this was originally developed as a software methodology. Scrum is underneath the Agile methodology, which people may be familiar with. There were a dozen or so software development leaders who developed the Agile methodology manifesto, which really has 4 points, in that the Agile development method puts individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It puts working solutions before comprehensive documentation or SOPs, which you would need in a mature business process. It puts the customer collaboration over contract negotiations. So the customer, the relationship before just the words. And it makes responding to change over following a plan. That is why you're agile and able to adjust to immediately meet issues and needs. In addition to the Agile methodology, the college had recently undergone some initial resilience training, and we actually were getting ready to spin up a very large resilience planning session and strategic planning session with our partners in Grand Rapids. But that was unfortunately derailed by the pandemic, and hopefully we can return to that. So in America and around the world, we are very good at disaster response, which means we can respond to the immediate disaster, a fire, a flood, or a big issue, but we aren't as good, or most of us aren't familiar with the term resilience. Resilience is really the ability to prepare and plan for, absorb, recover from, and be more successfully adapt to adverse events. So resiliency takes disaster planning and emergency preparation, but brings it to a whole new level. It means the foundation of your business is built with resiliency in mind, and that it is adaptable and flexible to meet unknown challenges, to meet concerns or attacks against your bottom line. And it allows the business to remain in operation and be minimally effective. Again, the college started these conversations in 2019. This was largely after I went to a AAMC conference entitled Strengthening the Resilience of the Academic Medical Community. And as a person who oversaw large research infrastructure in research facilities. I was concerned about resilience planning and wanted to be sure that we were ready to address and then tackle any major disaster that we had previously not thought of or planned for. I would recommend everybody to be familiar with the two publications at the bottom there. The one from the NIST Community Resilience Planning Guide, which really talks about how to build resilient communities, but it is also pertinent or applicable to organizations and businesses and even small units. I would also recommend reading and being familiar with the Strengthening Disaster Resilience of the Academic Biomedical Research Community, Protecting the Nation's Investment. This was a large study conducted by the NIH and the Howard Hughes Institute, and the findings were quite concerning, that the United States has invested heavily in its research infrastructure over the last half a century or so, but that research infrastructure is very fragmented and fragile, and it does not have a strong foundation to withstand certain emergencies or instances. And so the goal of that study was to tell academic institutions to start planning and preparing. And it is likely that the NIH will require resilience planning to be documented and shown by the institution, which will provide favorable grant funding to that institution that shows that they are prepared and they have soundly invested the government's dollars to build a resilient research organization. I have to give a plug for the Disaster Resilience Universities, or DRU Network. This is an amazing network of disaster resilient, like-minded people across at universities across the world, with expertise in many different functional areas. This network was instrumental during the pandemic. Most people can join and be a part of it. This is a collective group that shares best practices, best knowledges, fields questions, and tries to help each other during these times of hardship. I would also plug this network and say they identified this risk very early on, and late January is when I notified my leadership that I thought there was a concern about a potential pandemic coming, and that came directly out of the DRU network. So last but not least, we talked about being resilient and being prepared. Why do I believe in this so much? Because I've lived this since I was a little Cub Scout. And why am I so enthusiastic there? Well, that was the day I graduated from being a Cub Scout to a Boy Scout. So it's been ingrained in me to be prepared and be resilient. Nearing the end of our lecture, I think it's also part of who we are as Spartans. We have the mantra of the motto, who will? Spartans will. We are here to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. We are here to tackle the global issues and make the world a better place and serve those who are underserved. I'd like to thank everybody today. I finished a little bit early. My apologies. I believe we have some time for Q&A at the end here. And with that, I would turn it back over to Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Jespersen. Yes, we do have several questions from the audience that I'll begin funneling to you. The first question here is, how did MSU accommodate faculty and students who didn't want to return to campus? Did they employ counselors to help these people with anxiety, or have you guys found that people accept the situation quickly?
There was a lot of concern about faculty and staff returning to campus. I think some of our most concerned staff were those that work in the residential hospitality services, like the dorms and other high touch point where they would have interactions with students and likely increase exposure. Part of the underlying principles of our plans was that people had to feel safe and had to feel comfortable returning to work. We had to identify and understand that there are vulnerable populations that could not return to work because of medical concerns or other family concerns, and that we had to be compassionate and caring and understand that everybody's situation isn't the same, and that we all have different dynamics at home and in our life. And so we tried to provide support for those individuals. We started weekly wellness sessions to try to provide resources and tools for those that were struggling during these times. I think our dean did an amazing thing when he spun up a town hall series. And so every week, we still have it to this day, the dean holds, Dean Aaron Sousa holds a 1-hour town hall meeting where he invites maybe somebody, a doctor of wellness, or he's invited, community leaders or college leaders or university leaders that have very hands-on information about the pandemic. We talked to ER doctors who were dealing with this pandemic at the height of the pandemic in Detroit, which was the worst area hit in our state. And so the idea was to provide good information, the best information at the time, and really make sure that everybody had the ability to interact and digest and understand that information. There are some people that are not going to return to work because they have true concerns. There are some people that are going to take advantage of the situation because they like working from home. There's no perfect answer, but I think you can try to accommodate and be creative.
Thanks, Mr. Jespersen. Here's the next question. What did MSU do with people who were not compliant with the new protocols?
So all of our plans started with the understanding that we're trying to change behavior, and we're trying to ask people to make a lot of changes in their life. And so we led by compassion. And so if you notice somebody without a mask, they were encouraged to wear a mask and reminded multiple times with the idea that this is new behavior. We're all changing. We all could use a reminder. We all could use some help to make sure we're doing this right. And so we really went forward with that idea and to try to lift everybody up to the same standards. That said, if there were rules written directly into our plans as to what would happen and the punishments that could happen if you did not follow those rules, we would err on retraining. We would err on, or we have removed badge access to buildings so people can no longer enter facilities or work. Which means they are working remotely. And then if there's additional issues or concern after that, there's a way to triage or increase the need for management to kick in.
How thoroughly did MSU plan for the possibility of a large-scale outbreak within the campus? Was it prepared to shut down quickly?
I think we did shut down pretty quickly. And so it's an interesting question. So I think we were abundantly cautious in the beginning and shut down very early. And we're ready to go when the governor made her orders. Luckily, because of where the university was situated, we're in the middle of the state in Lansing, and the majority of the cases were really coming out of Detroit. So that the timing and everything was beneficial to us. And then we are still largely shut down. Very few people are on campus right now. We have a couple of students because they have no alternatives or nowhere else to go. So we only have about 2,000 students living on dorms in campus. Normally that'd be much closer to 10 to 15,000 students on campus. We only have a handful of employees that are back to work on campus on a daily basis, and it's still only by necessity. And so MSU had to make a very quick decision early fall and late August, early September to keep classes hybrid and not bring students back to campus. I don't think anybody has a perfect crystal ball. I think we all want to err on the side of caution and safety while trying to provide the resources and education that we're here to provide and trying to bring the world back to a sense of normalcy.
Here's the next question. It's a related question, Brian. Did the university have a threshold of positive test rates that triggered the shutdown?
No, we shut down before students were back on campus. So that decision was made ahead of time before we were, necessarily ramping up for fall testing.
Someone in the audience is also requesting that you show the URL of the two publications. I think they were near the end of the presentation at the bottom. And actually what we'll do as well is, yeah, there they are, I think. What we'll do as well to everyone in the audience is we can share those URLs with you after the presentation as well. We can just send out a blanket email. Looks like we have one more question here, Mr. Jespersen. Oh no, that is not a question. Mr. Jespersen, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. This webinar was sponsored by Animal Care Systems, and it was in no way endorsed by ALAS. Each webinar in the series is produced independently by each company. Special thanks go to Jay Campbell of Somark Innovations for continuing to ensure the webinar runs smoothly. For details about upcoming webinars, visit the ACE community postings and ALAS LinkedIn page. Today's webinar will be freely available in the coming days on the Animal Care Systems website. Stay tuned later in the fall for our next webinar announcement. We hope you all remain safe and healthy, and until next time, keep up the good science.